Hello and welcome to True Crime Diary, in which we look at the annals of true crime to find events that happened on this week in history. I'm your host, Mark Decano, and with me are my friends, Jed Lester.
All right.
And Ruth Turner.
Hello.
This season has been a season of firsts. We've had our first recording on location.
Yes, we have. Slash only. Yeah.
Well, yeah, first.
All right, fine.
We've had our first guest. In fact, we've had our first two guests.
We have to have two guests. Yeah.
And now we're having our first rewind episode.
Yeah.
So this season is a season of firsts. And our rewind episode is to look at our first episode. Quite right.
And if Jed remembers this episode, that'll be another first.
It'll be two episodes I won't remember. Two episodes of the same subject.
I've listened to all of it. I must admit, I haven't listened to the first episode because I thought, oh God, this is going to be... We didn't know... I mean, we barely know what we're doing now. So imagine the first episode. I listened to Guy Fawkes. I've probably listened to these ones 4 times. Fawkes. Wow. Cooper.
Yeah. Your favourite one.
Mm-hmm.
Thames Torso.
Yeah.
Those ones. I reckon I mean, not like, in a row or anything, but every... like when I'm on a flight or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought, Thames Torso. I wonder what that's about. and I'll listen to it, obviously.
Is the reason that you listen to them over and over because you've forgotten that you've listened to them over and over before?
Or recorded them.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, Ruth Ellis. I mean, who's she?
You what? Ruth who?
Oh, I haven't heard this one.
Really? What happens here? I'm pretty sure she got away.
But anyway, I listened to the first 10 minutes and I thought, we're all finding our feet, obviously.
Yeah.
But the only thing I would say in our defence is that we / you chose quite a heavy, hard-hitting Ep 1. And understandably, it's not a laugh a minute. Whereas in recent ones, we've obviously chosen subjects that we want to talk about, but we've also chosen ones that we can go, I don't know, wahee, pirates.
There's no pirates. There's no pirates.
As opposed to, because I personally, obviously, not overly bothered about talking about, mass murder that's within the last few years. I don't mind if it's Victorian or something.
Yeah.
That's fine. But it was quite, it's quite hard hitting, basically, isn't it?
Yeah. Obviously, it was dictated by the date, for one.
Yes, it was.
But also, I think I chose that one at the time because I just thought it would be one that would be well known enough that people might want to take an interest in it, but they might not know the detail about. I mean, that goes for all of them, really. But
I'm just looking at the first 3. They're all a bit murder involved.
Yeah,
Ellis, Crippen.
Yeah, we are a true crime podcast.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
But then we kind of relax a bit. Yeah. Then we relax a bit with the Mona Lisa and a bit of propaganda and
all soft-edged and heisty
and heists, stuff like that.
Yeah,
mind you, with Dennis Nielsen. But anyway,
but
true. It was just listening back. It felt more serious than it perhaps is now.
When I was rereading the material for Ruth Ellis, I actually thought that not the episode but the content is even sadder, more tragic and depressing than it was when I first researched it.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing.
Because of our voices.
It's not nice. Because of our idiocy. It's not very nice, is it? The tale.
No. And it's just not. It's not open and shut or as straightforward as you'd like to think it would be.
Sure,
it's not woman shoots man, she gets hanged.
Yeah,
it's just
Yeah, there's a lot more.
It's not that simple.
There's a lot of backstory.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Did it do in the kind of order of pod downloads? I mean, I know it was the first one, and it's technically had nearly 2 years to be downloaded.
Yeah.
But was it popular?
Well, again, as our first episode, it was a slow burner because people wouldn't have heard of, we didn't have any subscribers.
Don't know who we are.
But it is the second most downloaded overall to date.
Is it really?
Over the last 2 years, yeah. After the first one is the Great Train Robbery, which was comparatively recent. Because of at the time, as it was our first stab, so to speak, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't one, but never mind.
First shot.
It was that shot in the dark, so to speak. It was the audio was an incredible. There was lots of ums and ahs in it, and lack of confidence. I've sort of remastered it basically. I've revisited and I've done.
What do you call that in when you redo a CD?
That's remastered.
Remastered it.
Is it? Go back to the master tapes and you cut it again.
The Blu-ray version.
Yeah. I went to the
direct. It's the director's cut.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I went to the cloud filing cabinet and dug out the original master tapes.
The director's cut that nobody's been asking for.
Yeah. I've changed the audio slightly to make it better balanced and cleared a little bit of the hiss and pop out of it. And I've added in some extra sound effects and files.
In fact, there are some, and this is nobody's fault in the slightest, but in the first 10 minutes, there's some hilariously long pauses.
Yeah.
I was like, is my phone working? Have I pressed pause or something? But and I was like, oh, hang on.
Well, interestingly, this first episode was only 30 minutes long, even with all the dramatic pauses. It was quite short. Whereas now, I don't know if anyone knows this, but we normally talk for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, out of which I get probably about 45, 50 minutes episode, or maybe a little bit longer.
Out of which 2 hours of which me and Ruth don't know what happened.
Don't remember it. It's a good job you don't remember it, really, because
I don't think you can have 2 hours. How can you have 2 hours to edit when I speak for about 45 seconds of that 2 hours?
Speaking of audio, listeners, we're back to the Zoom method of communication, mainly because I've got COVID, as you can tell by my 10% sexier voice.
And after 2 years, we just don't like hanging out with him.
Yeah, that's it.
So, and also, we may as well come clean. We've run out of records. Well, Mark unhelpfully went on holiday.
Yeah, rude.
For a long time. And me and Rude don't do anything. So
I don't leave the house.
That's not true.
Well, my point is, if you're away, nothing happens.
Well, yeah.
Rude can draw all his daubings all he likes.
For this episode, we're going to release, I should say, our first rewind episode.
Yep.
As I say, we've remastered, re-edited, and I've changed a little bit. We're doing this little
made it better.
Do this brief introduction and basically look back at that first episode. So, as you say, 2 years have gone by. We've been doing this podcast. Lots changed in the way we do it, and it might sound a little bit different now. But also, the BBC are revisiting and reviewing their show called The Ruth Ellis Files: A Very British Crime Story.
That's an excellent series, I think.
Oh, right.
Episode 1 is out at the moment, and episode 2, I believe, comes out tomorrow as we record.
Yeah.
How many are there?
3.
It's quite an in-depth look at the evidence that was not bothered to be looked into at the time.
Oh, really?
Which is, it's not really even fresh evidence. It's just stuff they just didn't bother. Didn't bother their backsides with. Because it just, she said, I'm guilty, so that's that. That's all we need to know.
Oh, I see what you mean. I was going to say, would it have changed
I think it would absolutely
everything?
Have changed the outcome, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, God. Even more depressing.
Yeah, which means that our first episode would have probably been about Stylo Christofi instead of Ruth Ellis, who was
because that was the
penultimate woman to have been hanged.
Right,
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, but because she did it.
Well,
you can examine why.
Yeah, it's again, it's not as straightforward as that. She was driven there by her other boyfriend.
Yes.
What was his name? I've forgotten. Cousin? No.
Cousins.
Yeah. And the gun belonged to Cousin.
Yeah.
And Cousin was also carrying a gun. of his like both of the guns belonged to Cousin.
Oh, I didn't know he had a gun.
One
We
of them
mentioned
was his service one that he picked up in South Africa.
We mentioned, didn't we, in the episode that he drove her there, I think, and gave her the gun.
I think we probably did, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So I will agree wholeheartedly.
So he's an accessory.
He's an accessory, yeah. He should have been prosecuted as well. But that wouldn't have changed the outcome for her.
No.
It was also never discussed or even mentioned that she was repeatedly and brutally battered by him.
True.
By who? Not the cousin.
Blakely.
No, not Cousin, by Blakely, yeah.
He's not a cousin.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
His name is Cousins. He's not a cousin.
I thought it was a cousin.
As in soap.
Oh, okay.
So he's not squeaky clean.
Hey?
Isn't it? Haven't we done cases where if you are an accessory, you still get the same verdict?
I think you're thinking of Bentley and Craig.
Yes, exactly. But the driving there, each of them carrying a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you could argue that that's quite joint enterprise, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And he almost certainly would have been involved in the planning of it. You don't just give someone a lift to a murder and not really understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a cousin, though, wasn't she?
She asked him to take her. I think they were both pretty drunk at the time, to be honest. But she asked him to
They always seem to be drunk.
Yeah.
Whenever I've heard any recording of them, they're always drunk.
I don't know. We know he gave her the gun. We know that. And she said as much. I mean, what we're arguing here is nothing in Ellis's favour at all. We're just saying that he should have been prosecuted and either imprisoned or hanged as well. So
basically, yeah.
I know. I agree with that completely.
And let's also look at her defence. Her defence was provided by the Daily Mirror.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
They do not have an interest in this going really boringly.
Yeah. Yes, I forgot about that. It wasn't it? Totally provided by them.
Yeah, I mean, at the trial, she basically just said, "Yeah, I did it. I meant to do it. Let's get on with it," kind of thing. And that's in a nutshell. But yeah, it was just the only reason anyone was arguing in her favour was to keep the story going, I think.
Yeah,
very sad.
The reality of the situation, it should never have got to the point that it did get to, because Blakely was a nasty piece of work.
What's the name of that?
Yeah.
What's the name of that?
Absolutely was.
Doc?
It's the Ruth Ellis Files, I think.
What's it on?
On the BBC.
BBC.
Oh, right. I'm going to
BBC
type it
4.
in now,
BBC 4.
Okay, I'm going to watch that.
So everyone should listen to this episode, as they hopefully still are. Listen to the episode we recorded 2 years ago, and then watch the documentary on BBC 4.
Watch the actual facts.
The experts.
In a professional documentary.
So the date we're looking at this time is the 13th of July, and in 1955, Ruth Ellis became the last woman to be hanged in Britain. She killed her lover, David Blakely, and stood over the body saying, "I'm guilty and a little confused." She was arrested by an off-duty policeman and immediately confessed to the crime.
Sounds fascinating.
So Ruth Ellis, what do we know about her?
I don't know much, but I will say she clearly had an idol that was Marilyn, because
she looked like Marilyn Monroe.
That's why she had that haircut. She clearly wanted to look like Marilyn. The haircut was very of the time.
You must think I was born yesterday.
Yes. I mean, she definitely modelled herself with her platinum blonde looks on Marilyn, definitely.
Fantastic story. Thank you, Professor Monroe.
Ellis was very popular. She was considered quite the beauty.
Right, okay.
She started her career, as we know it, in nude modelling, and then she got a job in the Court Club in London and became a prostitute.
Oh, right. I was about to say, what kind of club is it? Gentleman's club?
A gentleman's club, yes.
Wasn't tennis then?
Wasn't a tennis club. So she was born about 1926. Their family moved to London, weirdly, during the war. So it was about 1941. And when she was 17, she had her first pregnancy. She had a son who they called Andy. His name was Claire Andre, and he lived with Ellis's mother. So he'll come.
His name was Claire.
His name was Claire. They called him Andy.
Okay.
Claire was his father's name, so the son was named Claire. If you're confused now, just wait.
But on the way she was brought up, it's a surprise that she did her father the honour of naming her son after him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a bad upbringing. He wasn't a nice man.
Oh, right. Oh,
But, they say women marry their fathers, and he was a drunk and an abusive father, and so
dear.
was everyone that she had relations with afterwards.
Right, okay.
So she found her type. She was headstrong. There's no denying that. She was very forthright. She knew the kind of man she wanted to be around. So this is setting up the type of relationship that she would have.
So primarily her income was working at a club, which was what? It was a brothel.
It was a gentleman's club, so she would be serving drinks.
So
She was a hostess.
part of the
Yes, she was hostess.
duty.
But the owner of the club basically had slept with all of the
Oh,
hostesses.
right. Okay.
And she made her living after that, pretty much. So this is about 1950 now. She made her living off of prostitution and hostessing at the club. In her role as a prostitute, she got pregnant again. This time it was aborted, which would have been illegal at the time. And then in November of 1950, she married George Johnson Ellis. Her born name was Hornby, Ruth Hornby. Her father changed that to Nielsen. But then she married George Johnson Ellis, who was a divorcee, he was a dentist. He had 2 kids. And he was not a nice man. He was very like her dad. He was violent. He was an alcoholic who was very jealous.
Right. Did
Lovely
they
guy.
meet at the club?
Yes.
Okay, fine. There's a pattern.
There's a pattern. So you can imagine someone who would go to that kind of a club.
Yeah.
But she left him many times, but she always went back. They had a daughter named Georgina. Another pattern. Father's name George, daughter's name Georgina.
Right, yeah.
So in 1953, she becomes manager of the place called the Little Club in Knightsbridge. So we're now talking she's in the West End. So she's come to a better club. She's a West End club. There's celebrities going in there. She's the manager now, not just a hostess. And in there she's rubbing shoulders with people who've, been on in the theatre, and she knows of a racing driver, and through this racing driver she meets David Blakely, who's also a racing driver. He's, unlike her, he's got quite a well-to-do background. He's public school. Mm-hmm. He was educated at Sandhurst, but he's also a bit of a drinker, and at this time he's already engaged to someone. And again, this is a pattern of behaviour because he's constantly having an affair. He's engaged to Mary Dawson, but he's sleeping around. So he meets Ruth Ellis, and almost immediately he moves into her flat above the club with her, even though he's engaged.
This is quite a sort of a social transformation from a young girl brought up in Rhyl in North Wales, which is not a particularly well-developed area at that time. It would have been rough and full of drinking men's clubs and stuff. And
Yes, yeah.
to now be living essentially the high life in London with famous people. That must have
it's
been
quite
pretty
so.
exciting in some ways, despite all of the abuse going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's what she's been used to, so...
Yeah, that's normality, I suppose.
Exactly. So it wouldn't have been anything out of the ordinary for her. The only thing that changed in her life was moving up market and rubbing shoulders with, people she reads about in magazines and newspapers.
A higher class of abuser.
Well,
The only thing I know, I don't know much about David, but I've heard that he's generally hideous individual.
he's a drinker. He's a womanizer. So yeah, it's not it's quite a short walk to abuse from there.
I can be a jerk and no one can stop me!
She gets pregnant again. This is her 4th pregnancy now. This one is also aborted. This one is pregnant by Blakely. Then Ellis meets Desmond Cusson. And now Cusson is a bit more respectable. He's ex-RAF. He's in a family business, Cusson & Co. They're like in tobacco. They're tobacconists.
Cousins.
Cussons.
Cousins.
So she moves in with him now. Ellis has moved in with Cusson. But she's still seeing Blakely at the same time. And Blakely's still seeing other women. Now, apparently they got engaged, inverted commas, or they arranged that they would get engaged.
Engaged to be engaged.
Engaged to be engaged, exactly. They made an agreement that they would be married,
Sure.
but of course, he's
Too busy
that's never going to
engaged.
happen. And then in January 1955, she was pregnant again. It's her 5th pregnancy now. However, this one was a miscarriage because in one of their great arguments, Blakely punched her really hard in the stomach and forced a miscarriage.
No doubt deliberately, I would imagine, but...
Yeah.
You bastard! I'll make you regret that!
And it worked, did it?
Yeah, she miscarried.
His eyes, I mean.
Yeah, she miscarried. But what we've seen is we've really established a pattern of the fact that her type is horrible, horrible men. Okay, really nasty piece of work.
How do you know what a pretty girl wants?
Except for cussing, apparently. More on him in a bit. But, she's lived a life of abusive childhood. She's got abusive relationships. She's had pregnancies, abortions, miscarriage, prostitution, surrounded by lecherous old men in smoky clubs.
Sometimes my brain gets real starved.
So it's possibly no surprise that after had more and more arguments, that on the 10th of April, which was an Easter Sunday, this is 1955, Ellis went out looking for Blakely. She took a taxi, apparently, to Hampstead, from where she walked down to the Magdala pub.
Yep.
Still there, it's closed.
Yeah, it's closed.
They're trying to open it this year. The Ellis. No, it's the Magdala pub, and Blakely's car was parked outside. So she waits in the doorway of the shop next door until he comes out.
So she knew he was drinking there or hanging out there.
Yeah.
Saw his car.
Yep. He's obviously inside because he's a drinker.
Sure. Yep.
He comes out with a friend of his called Clive Gunnell. She sees them. She's waiting in the doorway. She steps out and basically fires a gun at him.
Right.
She misses, so he tries to run. He runs around the car. She chases after him, shoots again, he goes down. And then she stands over him and fires 3 shots into him. In fact, so close is she that there's actually powder burns on the wounds from the gun. She tried to fire a 6th time, but the gun sort of jammed. And when she got it to fire, she wasn't pointing at him, so it ricocheted. Then it hit someone else, hit a bystander who was wounded.
Wow.
And then, quite calmly, she asked Clive to call the police.
So basically, we're obviously talking about murder, but we are literally, in the eyes of the law, we're talking about murder 1, as opposed to anything else, basically, aren't we? You go out there with intent and then carry out the crime.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then say, I know you saw me do it, but I did it. Yeah. That's the highest category of killing.
Yeah, and you're talking first degree murder. First degree is like premeditated. Now, it's interesting, we didn't really have it like that at the time.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure we do have it now in that respect, but British law is a bit strange. So at the time, the charge would have been murder. There's no degrees of murder. Crimes of passion aren't really recognised.
So manslaughter was still murder. I mean, I know manslaughter is murder, but there is a difference.
Yeah, well, manslaughter is an accidental death.
Killing without intent.
Yeah,
exactly. So the way my understanding is this: murder 1 is premeditated intent to kill.
Yeah.
Second degree is crime of passion. So you intended to kill in that moment. You didn't plan it.
That could be argued for a defence lawyer.
Yeah, you get it down to murder 2. But again, in Britain in 1950, you did it.
It was murder, right?
That's it.
Right, okay.
And then you kind of have third degree, which is that you intended to harm but not to kill. So you killed someone, you didn't intend to kill them, you intended to harm them.
You could probably argue that as well.
Yeah, and then manslaughter is you didn't intend to do anything, but somebody died.
Very interesting, but too long. Should be short and sweet.
But that is a modern take on it. Now, bear in mind, you're talking about British justice in the 1950s. You shot a gun, someone died, it's murder, you hang.
Yes, and there's no other
sentence.
So if that was to happen today, ignore the degrees of murder. If that were to happen today, what would happen? It would be life in prison, but we're talking 25-year stretch, and
could
then
be diminished responsibility.
It could be, yeah, and then it would also be, if there was such a thing as good behaviour, she could. Modern day, she could easily be out within 15 years, couldn't she?
I would say so. Yeah.
I could be remembering this wrong, but was there not a case where a woman was abused by her partner long term for many, many years, killed him,
I've
deliberately killed him,
yeah.
but was pretty much allowed to go?
Yeah, I think they
There's
argued
loads of
self-defence, didn't they?
Yeah.
Because it was a long term. You're literally preventing yourself being harmed anymore.
Of course, yeah.
It's difficult to look back and see how it would have been then compared to now. But
So
I mean,
the modern day version could have been she could have argued a lesser degree, and ultimately, with good behaviour, she would have got out. But by the time the 70s came round, she would have been out, basically.
I mean, if they'd argued, abusive behaviour, and obviously background of it and everything else, and crime of passion, which, as I say, was never really a thing in Britain. In France, people have very deliberately planned and committed murder and got off or got very small sentences in the past because it was considered a crime of passion, which of course is a big thing in France. Whereas in Britain, we're too stoic to be passionate about something.
Imagine the amount of people who were hung but weren't guilty. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And spousal abuse wasn't really a crime in the 50s in the UK.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No.
But
if anything, it was encouraged.
Rape wasn't even in the statutes until 1991.
Well, it's part of this. It's a horrible patriarchy. Now, I mean, you can argue that now, but at the time, it was just literally the wife is the homemaker. You stay at home. Right. You do what I tell you.
Yeah,
and that's it. You don't have a life of your own. And if you're going out to do a job, it's because I sent you, or I expect it of you.
So the police turned up, presumably.
Well, there was an off-duty policeman who actually placed her under arrest. When he arrested her, she said, "I'm guilty. I'm a little confused." So he took her in, and she confessed at the station. They wrote out a confession.
Yep.
A confession that's less than 3 pages long.
Yeah. Well, something that comes up
by modern standards.
Does the length matter?
Is basically there's no detail in it at all. There's nothing.
Yeah.
Confession. Oh, right.
And it starts with the 3 words, "I am guilty," full stop.
Yes. And in fact, and I'm sure that they could have been taken, if someone from a third party was to read that, they'd go, hang on, this is very short and succinct, so it's probably like the police wrote it and said, sign that. However, in fairness, Ruth Ellis was a big fan of brevity. I mean, most of the statements she makes are really short.
I'm glad I killed the bastard.
But she's got every opportunity before trial, at trial, and subsequently to appeal or, make an address of some kind. And she doesn't. She specifically says, I don't want to appeal. So it's succinct, but that's, as I say, when she shot Blakely, she said to Clive Gunnell, go and call the police, Clive, or words to that effect. And then when the policeman arrived, she said, I'm guilty. I'm confused. It's literal short sentences.
What was the dates of meeting Blakely and murder?
Well, it's less than 2 years.
My general feel about the whole situation was, by this time, I mean, to just how it felt to me, was that she'd had this life. I mean, she'd been abused sexually by her father when she was a little girl, and she'd been abused since then by practically every man she'd ever met. Physically abused, sexually abused. And she almost got to a point in her life where she thought, this has got to stop.
Yeah.
I'm going to end this. It doesn't matter what happens to me after that. It can't be worse than this. My life can't get worse. I'll kill him. I love him, but I'll kill him, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
She's right. I don't know the detail about long-term kind of sexual abuse, but the notion of continued abuse is clearly apparent.
Yeah, and what you said, Rue, about, she loved him but he had to stop, it's very true. I mean, she wrote, when she was in prison, awaiting execution, she wrote to Blakely's parents, and she said in the letter, she said, and I'm paraphrasing, but she said something along the lines of, I always loved your son, and I will die loving him. She was in love. She was, he was a bastard, but she did love him.
But she wanted to die. She wanted to hang so she could be with him again.
Yeah.
Well, don't know what to say to that.
No.
Very interesting, but stupid.
Okay, so 20th of June, still in 1955. The case goes up in number 1 courtroom at Central Criminal Court, or what you and I would call the Old Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
And the Crown Prosecutor, one Mr. Christmas Humphreys.
Yes, I've heard of him before.
He asked her one question. I mean, this has to go down as the shortest trial in British criminal history.
Okay, yeah.
He asked her one question, which was, when you fired the revolver at close range into the body of David Blakely, what did you intend to do?
Yes, good question.
Great question. You can see why I got the job, really.
Yeah.
And Ellis, her response was, it's obvious, when I shot him, I intended to kill him.
Right, good answer.
So, yeah,
Succinct.
So, I mean, there you go. Bang, done. Case closed.
Was that it?
Yeah, pretty much.
So they didn't elaborate at all?
Well,
That's why he gets the big bucks.
That's why he gets, yeah.
Well, I don't know. If he'd stretched it out a bit, wouldn't he charge by the hour?
Obviously, that wasn't the whole back and forth, but pretty much, they could have just said, right, there you go, bang, lunch. Because that was it. She just literally stood up there and said, I killed him, and I intended. When I shot him, I intended to kill him. So that's intention and action.
I submit that this was not a hot-blooded crime of passion. That at least could be understood, if not condoned.
The jury was out for 20 minutes, which is not long. And if anything, I'd say in that instance, that was a bit long because it was so cut and dry. If anything, I would say that they probably thought about it a bit longer because she was a woman. They came back and said guilty, obviously.
Yes, I see what you mean. Yeah,
because it was so cut and dry. But why did it take 20 minutes to say that? Because it was so obvious. I think, if anything, it's because it was a woman. Because female killers in history, particularly around that time, have got a lot of attention because they're unusual.
I think on some level, women don't mind the idea of destroying a man,
Right, okay.
Blokes kill people left, right and centre.
We're terrible.
Was there any...
I killed a guy before you arrived this morning.
Was there any suggestion, obviously not in the trial, but in general culture, that the hanging was on its way out at the time?
Absolutely. And again, the reason why it might have been 20 minutes to think about this is because the only possible outcome of a guilty verdict was death by hanging.
Yes.
No mitigation, nothing.
And because the last man to hang was a lot later, wasn't it? Like 10 plus years?
It was a bit later. It wasn't that much. It was in the 60s.
Right. Okay.
It wasn't that much later. And there weren't many, in fairness, in that time period. There weren't many that hanged, which possibly makes her hanging all the weirder.
So it's being... I mean, obviously, they didn't know. Should we do one more hanging? There was no such thing as, let's make this the last one. But it was being talked about, was it?
It was being talked about, yes.
What do you call it? The banning of hanging.
Yes, and in the same period as this, you've got Ruth Ellis, so she's a female killer, definitely guilty, but apparently a little bit possibly justified.
Yep.
Also around the same time, you've got Bentley of Bentley and Craig.
Of course, yeah.
Who was hanged
and
for a killing that he
definitely didn't do.
Didn't commit, yeah. And also around this time, you've got Timothy Evans, who was hanged for the murder of his wife and child, who it was later found out were victims of John Christie of Rillington Place fame.
Yes, right, okay.
So you've got now 3 hangings. One didn't do it, one justified to do it, and another one who also didn't do it. And they all hang. Now you can't, if someone's in life imprisonment, you can change things. But if you're hanged, you're hanged. And I think the
culture was just becoming a bit, actually, do you know what? It needs to be a bit less than black and white.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Also, saying that you did it doesn't actually mean that you did it.
Exactly. Well, Tim Evans confessed, but we know he was innocent. And Ruth Ellis confessed, and we believe that she did it. Bentley didn't confess. Bentley didn't even do it. And there were loads of policemen on the roof who knew he didn't do it.
But it still took 10 years until hanging was banned.
But then, what was it? Within 2 years of that, diminished responsibility was given as a reason.
Okay, so different degrees came in.
Yeah.
Right. So within 2 years of her being hanged.
Okay.
Now, the one alternative that she did have available to her was insanity. But she was examined 3 times. Once by the defence, once by the prosecution, and after her arrest before it went to court proceedings. She was examined 3 times, and none of them found any reason to believe that she could plead insanity.
It's not as if she were a maniac, a raving thing.
She's
guilty. She's now awaiting sentence to be carried out.
Yep.
Okay.
Of which there is only one verdict.
Of which there's only one.
Yep.
Well, she's sentenced to hang, so
Right.
we're waiting.
Yep.
She's now waiting for that. Now, she fires the lawyer, who is Cousin's cousin.
Yeah.
Cousin's cousin.
Cousin's cousin, yep.
Cousin of cousin. His job is essentially over unless she's going to appeal. She didn't want to appeal.
Sure, right.
So she fired him. She called in Mission and Simmons, who was the solicitor she wanted to write her last will and testament to. Now, she told them something that she didn't bring up at her trial, which was about Cousin. So apparently Cousin gave her the gun, showed her how to shoot it, and then drove her to the end of the road.
Oh, right. Hang on. Twist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about where she got the gun, but I kind of thought, oh, she'll kind of hang out with nefarious types, so it might have been quite easy. But anyway, it turns out there's a twist.
Yeah, well, Cousin's at XRAF, and
there you go.
This is
Probably had one.
He probably had one. Yeah, he had more than one, I imagine.
Yeah. It's that post-war period where everyone had
Everyone
a gun
had
in
a-
the drawer in the kitchen.
Everyone had a gun.
Right.
They were here, there, everywhere. A whole bunch of them.
It literally, you demob to get off the boat,
Yeah, sure.
and you just go home with your full army kit.
There
on
were
your back.
2 or 3 in my granddad's house.
Oh, there
When
you
we were
go.
Kids, and we used to pull them out and play with them. There was a Luger in there, and
Okay,
that he'd brought back from Germany. You know.
okay. What?
He was in the SS. It's fine.
Ah, right, okay. That makes sense.
You know, and bayonets and all sorts. You know.
Yeah. Who's going to have a bayonet lying around? Oh, yeah, hang on. So that's all very interesting information. Of course, the trial's over now.
Oh, right. So, because her abrupt confession made the trial go very quickly, they kind of didn't have time to ask any other.
Well, yeah, this didn't come up.
Where did you get the?
But she didn't volunteer this information until she was writing her will. You know, and it's
Well, it's too late, isn't it? There's no. It's the verdict has been delivered.
Yeah, well, again, they've still got opportunity to appeal, but she specifically said when she was telling them this information not to use it in any attempt to appeal the sentence, which is weird. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
It's really strange. She's making no effort. In fact, she's deliberately going up against any attempt to get her off the death sentence. They did investigate this claim, but the Home Secretary at the time, one Gwilym Lloyd George, he's the Home Secretary, and now he said that it wouldn't have made any difference if that had been the case, because all that would have done was proved premeditation.
Even more so.
If they'd arranged to have the gun and have her dropped off, they would have said, well, that just proves it was premeditated,
Yes,
but don't make any difference at all.
Okay,
She's still going to hang. This the Home Secretary was quite fun, because the Judge Havers, having passed sentence, he appealed to the Home Secretary. Because even he knew that, maybe this isn't a hanging.
The judge appealed.
The judge in the case who pronounced sentence, he appealed to the Home Secretary.
Okay.
To have him arrange clemency. And there was a petition for clemency that got 50,000 signatures. So you can see, there's a lot of people in her corner, even if she's not.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, I'm pretty as far as, not the verdict necessarily, don't want her to hang, but she'll have had so many people on her side in general, the public.
Quite interesting, one of the things the Home Secretary said, because he's listened to what everyone said, and he made this comment apparently, because the bystander got shot with the ricochet bullet. He said, "Can't have people shooting off guns in the street."
Yep,
it's like, there's no clemency because we can't have it.
Yes,
can't be allowed. Shouldn't be allowed.
Sure, yeah,
disgusting.
Yeah. Down with this sort of thing.
Down with this sort of thing. Boo to all of it. Something about the time, I think. They're sort of saying, well, no, we're not having that. Good Lord. So, to the gallows she goes. So, anyway, so there's an appeal. So, she's got a sister named Muriel Jacobate, who, at the age of 81, in 2003, her appeal was thrown out by the appeal court. Although there was criticism about the Criminal Cases Review Commission's handling of the review, the fact of the matter is that the appeal court ruled that the decision had to be made according to the law at the time. So now, in modern law, you can reduce.
Of course, yeah.
You can basically bargain your way down to manslaughter or what have you.
I mean, it's horrendous.
Yeah.
Would it have... What? Sorry, what was the...
I think the argument was what they would have called battered woman syndrome.
Yes, right.
Which is basically...
which is completely understandable.
She was arguably defending herself.
But it was thrown out because the law at the time was the law at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not really a pretty picture for her whole family. I mean, her father, George Ellis, in 1958, he hanged himself. Her mother attempted suicide in 1969. When she was disinterred from Holloway Prison, she was reburied in Amersham, and the son Andy, he destroyed the headstone.
Wow!
And it had Ruth Hornby was the name on the headstone, her original name. So he destroyed the headstone, and in 1982 he killed himself. Although what's interesting about that is his funeral was paid for by Christmas Humphreys, the prosecution.
Wow. That's interesting.
And apparently Judge Havers had been sending him money. So the son Andy, he killed himself, but the daughter Georgina, she lived on. She died at the age of 50 from cancer, but she didn't kill herself like everyone else.
So, it sounds like a stupid question, but obviously the father killed himself 3 years after her hanging.
Yes.
Do we know why he killed himself?
Oh, he was an alcoholic, and
right.
Yeah, he's just
And how did he kill himself?
He hanged himself.
He hanged himself.
Yeah.
Poetic.
Well, he earned it. Well, this has been a joyful roller coaster. So let's end with something a little bit more fun. So here's an interesting fact.
Oh yeah.
So in 1951, Ruth Ellis got a small bit part in a movie called Lady Godiva Rides Again.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
stellar cast.
I've heard of that.
That's
British, is it?
Yes. Now, Diana Dawes was in the movie. She wasn't a star. She was a supporting role.
Right, yeah.
She was a supporting role, and she was in the movie. And it was about a beauty pageant and everything else. Actually, it was re-released in the US under the name Bikini Baby in '53, a couple of years later, and Diana Dawes was billed as the lead role.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in 1956, Diana Dawes made a movie called Yield to the Night. Now, this is not based on Ruth Ellis, but it's remarkably similar story.
Wow.
So the real Ruth Ellis was in a movie with Diana Dawes a few years before she died, and in the following year, Diana Dawes played a role
effectively played her.
Yeah, which is interesting. But for my money, the quintessential Ruth Ellis role was played by Miranda Richardson in 1985's Dance with a Stranger.
Is her nose as pretty as mine?
Rupert Everett played Blakely.
Yuck!
And the late great Ian Holm played Cusson.
Oh God!
No walk-on part from Nigel Havers.
No walk apart from Nigel Havers. No, Nigel Havers, of course, grandson of Judge Havers. Well, that's all for this time. If you want to know more about what we've discussed over the course of this episode, then just Google it or something. Join us next time when we'll be similarly discussing and digressing on another event in true crime history. Until then, my thanks to Jed and Rue. My name's Mark, and we'll see you on the next date in our True Crime Diary.